that's something that happened to everybody this week. I'll get into it in a moment. Hi, everybody. We should be getting audio. Hi, everybody. Okay, that's how you doing? What's weird? Hi, everybody. Hello. Oh, okay. Sorry for that. If you're hearing a little bit of echo, and apologies for starting a little bit late. My fault, by the way.
Sorry for that. If you're hearing a little bit of echo.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was a echo right there. Apologize. So here we are in the Lesson Led podcast, and we're gonna. Well, first of all, since we're sort of starting very rocky here, let me focus on something. Like my mind, focus on something that's gonna be the Pokemon movie trailer. Not really video games news, but I still want to talk about it because I see some extreme reactions back and forth. You haven't seen it yet?
I haven't seen the trailer thing yet, but I have kind of seen screen caps and stuff of it. So
yeah, it's a Pikachu detective, right?
Detective, yep.
Detective Pikachu. That's
voiced by
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool himself.
Yeah, for one, I like it. That's the thing. Like some people absolutely like it, and there's some people who absolutely hate it. Like, oh my god, this is so scary because it's supposed to be like real life, style CGI kind of thing. Been tried before, but I don't know. I kind of like it. I guess the reason why I don't have a hate relationship with it is like, I didn't grow up with Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm coming at it with like, oh, well, this is just animated characters, right? They look good or not, right? They look fine. I see much worse. Pikachu looks great. Most people actually love Bulbasaur. I think there's a Mr. Mime. I think scared a lot of people.
Well, Mr. Mime is pretty scary to begin with.
Yeah, so it was like, oh, what? And some others. But I think overall, I think I like it. And I think I don't really get excited about my movies. I'm not saying I'm going to watch it. It's just like, well, this looks like something that caught my eye in a relatively positive way. I'm trying to figure out why other people didn't think it this way. But that's what I liked about it. And go ahead.
I just don't quite, from being like an old school Pokemon fan. I'm not entirely sure what the, I guess, canon of this movie is. Is it supposed to be like set in like the main Pokemon universe? Because talking Pokemon are kind of unusual in that universe, and or is it like some weird cross between the mystery dungeon games where it's sort of like, I think you play as a character a human who somehow got transformed into a Pokemon or something, and the Pokemon kind of talk amongst themselves and do stuff. Well, I don't know what this is like in terms of like continuity.
The way they explain it is that the human character, the teenager or young adult, I don't know the age is supposed to be. He's supposed to be someone who can actually understand Pokemon in a way that other people can't understand, according to the trailer. Like, and this is just there are many Pikachu. This particular Pikachu is, Detective Pikachu, right? He shows up. He goes like, "Hey, I know you can't understand me, but," and paraphrasing from the trailer, "but I have this tail. I can electrocute you." And the kid goes like, "You can talk?" And then the Pikachu goes like, speaking in the voice of Ryan Reynolds, "You can understand me?" I've been so lonely. And then there's another scene where they show other people, and the kid is talking to other people like, "Yeah, can you understand what he's saying?" And they cut to, to what other people hear, and they just hear the "pika pika," it's like, and he goes like,
okay.
and Pikachu goes like, "Pika." That's "pika pika." That's the only thing they hear, right? They don't understand me, kid. So I think that was very interesting. And also sort of interesting how seemingly extreme reactions. People was like, "No, this is the most horrible thing ever," and people were like, "Oh, this is extremely cute," right? And even if I don't watch the movie, I want the plushies, I want the things, right? Another thing is that I read an article, response really, Ask a Game Dev on Tumblr, And I'm gonna read it because it's very interesting what they had to say about microtransactions. Um, Basically, they talk. Well, first of all, they have a bizarre. They open with the following paragraph. It really depends on The question is how a lot of gamers may not even humor a game if it looks like it could have microtransactions. Guilty as charged. How could you pitch and implement them to someone who doesn't feel comfortable paying money in a game they already paid for? So this is microtransactions on paid games, not free-to-play games. It opens the answer. It really depends on how far against this person. If somebody's super duper against something, like imagine Hillary Clinton trying to convince a diehard Trump supporter to vote for her. What? That's as an opening sentence is, or opening to a sentence, because the sentence is pretty long. I have to spend an enormous amount of effort to convince this person that even when the chances are good, this person will not be convinced. And then they go to trying to explain that the way they see it is as a value proposition. But that's an argument both for and against microtransactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, first of all, anybody can interpret anything as a value proposition. And second, there's also the fact that you already paid for this game. So shouldn't this be in the game?
Yeah.
And then finally, it's like, yeah, but the reality is that the people making decisions to set microtransactions, which are mostly publishers nowadays and big AAA games, they're not seeing it as a value proposition for the player. They're saying, what can we, section off that people are going to go, yes, I want to buy this, where before it would have been available in some other way, right? Like different costumes or skins or whatever. It's like, now we're going to charge you extra for it, right? On top of buying the game.
Unlockables or cheat codes.
Or, making the game extremely grindy so that you have to get, buy cheat codes and XP boost and magical, extra powerful weapons or whatever. Like, because, it's, or you can earn it in game currency. So that's not really, I guess the question is, how do I convince someone to get microtransactions? Which I think is, I don't know where to start, wrong start. But it's like, it never really addresses the fact that why people really don't like microtransactions, other than, well, people don't like it because they might be from the opposite political party or affiliation of the people presenting the microtransactions. That was a pretty bizarre statement. And I've seen him something. He also made another. This person, I don't know. I say him or he, but I don't know. I know who they are. So I apologize. So just go by, ask a game dev. Not the only person that's in Twitter and all that. So I don't know their identity, and I'm not gonna find out. It's not necessary. They also sort of answered back to Jim Sterling, for example, saying, "Oh, Jim Sterling did this review of Red Dead Redemption, said maybe there's factors about." The way the game, mechanics are implemented. And basically the answer was, well, you can't please everybody. There's always going to be someone who's going to be unhappy. I'm like, that's not the point being raised in the critique. The critique is that this is kind of useless. And also goes into, well, there's a lot of work that got into it. It's like, yeah, and crunch.
Yeah. I saw the opposite from, Angry Joe's review. He's all like, oh my God, I love all the details and stuff. Maybe a little too much, but for the most part, he seems like, oh my God, look at all the details.
Yeah.
He even made fun of the ball testicles. Or the horse testicles.
Yeah. Oh, the ball physics, I suppose.
Yeah.
So now that we got those out of the way, let's start with the news. Let's start with Microsoft acquires Obsidian Entertainment.
So I think this was rumored before, and now it's a confirmation.
Yeah, they announced it at E3. This is from the Polygon. Microsoft has been a studio spending spree this year. In E3 2018, Xbox chief Phil Spencer announced that the company has acquired 4 studios: Ninja Theory, of DMC and Hellblade, Playground Games of Forza Horizon, which doesn't surprise me because Forza Horizon has been, Microsoft and Forza games have been tied together since at least, back to the 360. Undead Labs, State of Decay, Compulsion Games, Contracts, We Happy Few. Yeah, that one. Okay.
They can have that one.
Microsoft also, and that's after they went somewhere else. Establish a new internal studio, an initiative led by former studio head at Crystal Dynamics. The addition of Obsidian will bring some valuable RPG know-how to Microsoft Studio lineup. I guess, but yes. Obsidian is only known for making PC, well, recently PC only RPGs, going back to the sort of the Infinity Engine kind of thing, Baldur's Gate, stuff like that, which can be adapted to consoles, I suppose. I mean, there's nothing stopping it. You can do radio menus or simplify some of the options. So not really a big thing, but it's not the kind of game usually you expect on a console. And the games that they made for consoles are not the kind of games that I would recommend. Say KOTOR 2 and New Vegas, but they made them for consoles because that was part of the contract, right?
Yeah. So. Oh my God, New Vegas! I played that at launch on the 360, and I think that was part of the why I didn't. One of the many reasons why I didn't get as much enjoyment as I did with Fallout 3 was like, oh, it was so buggy and so bad.
Oh, and talking about buggy things, we can jump right into Bethesda and their release, which is officially the servers went live, of Fallout New Vegas. Fallout 76, bro. There being a lot of problems. Among them, a couple of days ago, that the beta itself some people found on the PC, cannot be installed unless you buy the game.
Yeah. So first you couldn't install the game because you would accidentally get deleted, and now you can't uninstall the game because somehow you don't own it or.
Yeah, this is the way it goes. Upon trying to uninstall it, this is from VG247.com. 24/7. Bethesda.net launcher pops up and prompts you to log in. Once you log in and getting an online status, players then attempt to install the game, but were instead met with a message saying you do not have access to this game. Boy. Yeah. So, by the way, there's also part in the PC, which means you have to have Bethesda's own client, which has been one of my complaints about not doing this, because I didn't want to have yet another client installed in my computer for no reason whatsoever other than that company wanted me to. So yeah.
Yeah. At least I guess there's you can always use third-party software to get it removed if you really needed to.
Yeah, but it feels like they're holding your hard drives to space because by the way, the at launch Day one patch DLC is ginormous and much bigger than the original game. We've seen this before, and still many people report, including, again, talking about Jim Sterling, his own review, report just game-breaking bugs. Now, yes, people say, well, it's Bethesda. Yes, that is true.
I think the main issue with this is going to be that one, Bethesda is all grown up now. They're not just a development studio, but they're also a publisher now. And I think a lot of people are not going to have as much patience with this because they're not all that happy with Fallout 76
existing in the first place.
Yeah, and from the game launched yesterday, and people don't seem to be all that blown away.
Yeah. It's an older game and an older, engine, which already has been criticized for being outdated. Basically the Skyrim engine. And it's like, yes, games as service. Hurrah. And, I don't know. I mean, I think ultimately this is, the folks that know, it's like, games like this have these problems and stuff like that. Yeah, but Bethesda has been accruing bad faith for a very long time, and I think this is the thing. It's like people are willing to forget as long as at the end of the day they get something they can enjoy, but time and time again, Bethesda has screwed up and has shown little or nothing for it. And there's so many times you can go on E3 and make, have jokes about, sometimes they don't work or whatever at your own expense. That kind of butt covering can only cover so far, right? If people go away, especially now in November, where in the launch of the game, and it's competing with many other games like Red Dead 2 and all the games, it's like, well, I have this other colossal game I'm playing that, I'm playing 200 hours playing. I'm going to go play that one. Or I still have my copy of Skyrim or whatever, or Fortnite. I don't have to be here, right? And what I seen of the game really is just Fallout 4 with multiplayer.
Yeah, and no NPCs.
No NPCs. So it's like, I mean, I guess I understand what they were trying to do, but I think they might have tried this type of gameplay with something else, right, before. And it's like, you could have tried that with some other games and then see if that works. Or just have a multiplayer version, a multiplayer, add on to Fallout 4. That could have worked. I don't know. I would have loved to go to Fallout 4, even Skyrim, as a co-op mode. That would have been cool. Hey, I'm doing this quest. I need some help. Hey, jumping over. Let's go kill this gigantic whatever. Because I got stuck here, or maybe you know how to do who to talk to, right? I've advocated before many times. I think it's much better to have a simpler co-op mode than go on full-on multiplayer, especially when you don't have a lot of content to begin with. And people say, yeah, that's very typical of MMOs, basically, which is what it is. It's sort of the Fallout MMO. But also, again, I had to point to a friend of the program, Nurse Lair, when he can show you a bunch of videos he's made about how many MMOs failed because of these very same reasons.
No content at the beginning, and
no follow-up, no follow-ups, no, bugs that always are easily exploitable, easy exploits, like frame rate issues. Now the frame rate is locked, of course, because they could unlock it very easily by changing the INI files. Bethesda. Talking about something slightly different. This is an old news, but I think it's worth talking about. Talking about testicles. Scum adds a dong slider. Supporters pack owners get an extra 2 inches. This is Vandy Chuck and PC Gamer. There's the multiplayer survival game Scum will be taking the latter approach in a coming Wild Hunter update, when it will enable players to customize their wangs, penises, using the same attribute points that determine strength, stamina, and intelligence. Because to some people, having a measurable extension is important to them. The standalone slider for adjusting size for your dong from 1 to 10 inches can be seen in the peen screen up above. There it says, you can go to the PCGamer.com article. But developer rep confirmed, because there are kinds of questions I get paid to ask, that increasing the size of your package will require points that would otherwise be spent on more practical character attributes. In other words, you can be very good at this game, which probably doesn't actually have any sex in it, by the way, with anything. Or you can walk around naked with a big piece, I suppose. And that's not your gun or your spear or whatever other thing you use survival. But the opposite also true. You can shrink your... this guy's having a lot of fun with this. You can shrink your ding to boost those attributes beyond what they normally would be. In other words, you can compensate or you can undercompensate. But this is the real kicker in the balls. Owners of the Scum Supporter Pack, which is it's a
DLC that it's literally do you want to support this game more and give us more money? Buy this DLC pack.
Will get an additional 2 inches on the unit, which they can swing around on a badge of honor or sacrifice bonus points elsewhere. Not even kidding. We have come to this. If you thought, horse testicle physics was a tad too much, now we have Dong DLC. Hurrah.
Dong DLC bonus length.
2 inches. You want to be more manly than anyone else? You can pay extra to be extra manly. or not, as the case may be. Yes, the state. That's what we're going to be talking about again. The state of the video game industry, because this is just getting ridiculous.
I mean, so this is like a smaller studio, and it honestly, like out of the Devolver Digital's presentation this year, this was probably my least liked game that they showed off. As
Yeah,
especially since especially when it's yet another like multiplayer survival game on early access on Steam. It's like really, I mean, maybe it's great, maybe it's really fantastic and fun, but it's like there's sort of like a dime a dozen on early access,
and people have moved on to battle royale. you
Yeah.
know, I mean, they still make money, and so Ark survival is out there, and so, but it's people are moving on, which is another issue we're gonna bring up later on. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like I think it's just, I mean, if it were for free, right, as a sort of in joke, or you get a refund or something, it's like, forget about it. Yeah, you can get 2 extra inches, whatever. And the whole thing about switching stats for that one stat, I guess it's funny. I mean, it's like, sure, you can be very, very manly, or you can compensate with bigger muscles or something like that. Literally in this game, if you are somebody who has like a broad chest and and an 8-pack, you probably are somebody who is compensating for literally something. But and one could argue in a game that doesn't have sex or sex mechanics, I hope. I mean, if that's the kind of game, then it could be that kind of game. Then really, it's truly cosmetic.
Yep.
It's the ultimate cosmetic pack. But this is a news I heard about, but you brought it to us. Ars Technica says Sony using open source emulator PlayStation Classic plug and for PlayStation Classic plug and play. So yeah. I'm gonna talk to us about this, and what your take on this.
So, as many of you know, that Sony is playing the Me Too game with a PlayStation 1 Classic, which is in the spirit of the Nintendo Entertainment System Classic and the Super Nintendo Entertainment Classic, is essentially a mini version of the PlayStation 1 that has 20 games on it. The interesting thing to note that this article points out is that it's, instead of using like an in-house emulator that Sony has developed, and they've developed PlayStation 1 emulators in the past. PlayStation 2 had one, the PlayStation 3 had one. This is using an open source one that you can download online and use yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of making something on themselves, they just took an open source one and modified it. So and honestly, personally, the lineup for this Classic does not interest me at all. It seems to be missing a lot of like the actual games that I would say are PlayStation 1 classics, and there's good reasons for it. Like you got none of the Spiral games are on there because they just released I can imagine it's because they just released the Spiral Reignited trilogy, and then why would Square Enix want to give the rights to release Tomb Raider when they have their new Tomb Raider line game, especially since the Shadow of Tomb Raider is probably not doing all that great.
Mm-mm. Got a huge price cut the other day, so I think by 30%, 30 to 40%.
Yeah, it was down to like $40 within like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So something that kind of pointed out in the article was, is it kind of cheap of them to use like an open source one, or is it kind of like legitimizing emulators in a way, like all these open source ones?
Yes and no, and I think this ties to the news when Nintendo won that 12 million, I believe it. No, let me check.
Yeah, it was 12. Yeah, I think it was 12 million.
23 million or 9.5 million pounds, so 12.23 million dollars or 9.5 million pounds in damages for running a pair against an Arizona couple running a pair of sites which offered pirated ROMs. Jacob and Christian Mathias admitted copyright infringement to Operation Love ROMs and LoveRetro.com until July this year when Nintendo intervened. Now, yes, and I guess this is Nintendo and sorry, it's the attitude that we can exploit these things when they're convenient for us, Sony.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're inconvenient to us, we're just gonna hack them. And especially now they've released the mini and the two minis, they're saying, yeah, we're gonna go back to our own catalog and we're gonna bring these games back. You know, games that essentially nobody has really played or done with or dealt with for about 20, 30 years. So now we're gonna sue so that there's no brand confusion. People will, you know, perhaps hack their own minis, because you can hack the NES mini and the Super NES and use them as emulator machines like you can do anything else, and then use them to have these free ROMs instead of whatever it is we might be selling them, or, you know, selling them for the Switch or on the Nintendo Store, etc. Yes, they did violate the law. I mean, they admitted to violating the law, so I suppose that's a clear violation of that, and they were willing to pay millions of dollars. Probably they were making money out of this in some way, so you know that's probably a settlement.
Probably through like advertisement, I would imagine,
and maybe Patreon and whatnot. On the other hand, it's this attitude about hating and exploiting modern communities, and these communities exist. Sorry. My bad. When they need it. I mean, Bethesda's done the same thing. It's like, oh, the game is not that great. Oh, but there's modders, right? And on top of that, we're going to charge for mods. And like, you know. And yes, you can make the argument that modders should be paid. I mean, they put a lot of work on it. But at the same time, it's sort of the environment. It's like, if you don't have a free exchange of ideas and people being able to use different mods, and it's like, you know, as long as you give credit. Like, you go to any mod site, it's like, a lot of the mods are built on earlier mods. And if people were charging for those mods, then these other things wouldn't really work, because they have to pay for it and then work on it and hopefully recoup at least their losses by selling them themselves, and it will be a mess, right? And especially in PC, but even now increasingly on consoles and in the retro console setting particularly, mods keep these things alive, and they keep these games alive. And it also goes to, you know, keeping, you know, records of games, and a lot of games, especially obscure games, which might disappear because people are not playing them anymore. People don't have the physical copies,
or like the studios don't exist anymore, and they can't get re-released because they're in some weird like legal publisher limbo or something.
And stuff like that. And so I wish there was a better way of handling this, other than just bringing down the ban hammer, so to speak. This is what it is, basically, by a court case. Yes, Nintendo has to defend their copyrights, or they're about to lose them, right? That is like kind of like the oblique theory behind abandonware. That if you don't support your copyrights, you don't support your games, then they're up for grabs. I think many games, particularly in games that are in companies that don't exist anymore, in platforms like the Commodore and original Apple and TRS and stuff like that, especially in even Atari. Well, Atari's been, you know, still survives in one form or another. They've been known to sue people as well. But there's still a lot of games that were in different platforms that those platforms will never be seen again. And so I think that's still a rich area. In fact, we're seeing, for example, like the release of the Commodore Mini, Commodore 64 Mini, which I looked at it and was like, well, it looks interesting, right? I would like to, just as a fan of that old home computer, I want to buy it, right? That's still a vibrant zone, but a lot of games in the 1990s and 2000s were more, because the home computer market shrunk and eventually disappeared. Either they were PC centric or console centric, and if the console manufacturers are still around today, are being that restrictive, then you could see a lot of these games disappear because they're not using them. Like you said, the companies that make them, to produce them and publish them, are not there. Nobody knows who has the rights, and so they can probably not even even if they wanted to, they can't really resell them because they don't have the full rights. You know, they had the rights. They in fact gave rights, licensing rights, for them to publish them in their system, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So, there has to be a way to bring back ROM sites because I think they do provide a good service overall. And I just like to have access to those games, even though in this channel we don't advocate piracy in any shape or form.
Yeah.
So talking about other games, and again, VG Video Games 24/7. Destiny 2 director says Bungie isn't disappointed with Forsaken sales, which is the most recent expansion pack for Destiny 2.
I'm not sure if we brought this up last week where we talked about that Activision mentioned that they were pretty disappointed with the sales of Destiny 2, along with a lot of last week was a terrible week for. Actually, I think it's the past couple of weeks have been a terrible. Let's just call it a terrible month for Activision. Their stocks tanked because
Twice.
Call of Duty didn't sell. Only sold $500 million worth of games only, and then they took another hit after the backlash with the announcement of Diablo Immortal, and so
and now this.
Yeah, and I believe those statements came from like a sort of like a shareholder meeting where they mentioned that they were pretty disappointed with how Destiny hasn't been performing as well as they have been expecting, and they might have to look into trying to monetize it differently. But on the opposite end, Bungie has come out and said like, oh no, we're so happy with how the latest DLC has done, and they're pretty proud of their work. So
to quote Activision COO, Chief Operating Officer, not financial officer, not the CEO, Chief Operating Officer, and during last week's earnings call with investors, Activision CEO Cody Johnson said, while Forsaken is a high quality expansion with strong engagement, that's a key word for microtransaction sales, and new modes of play, it did not achieve Activision's commercial expectations. There's still work to do to fully re-engage the core Destiny fan base. I.e., yes, we're making money, but we're not making as much money as we thought on microtransactions. That last sentence, there's still work to do to fully re-engage the core Destiny fan base, is key because it's re-engage. That means people are disengaging.
Or it means that they're playing, but they're not buying into the microtransactions.
Exactly. They're not fully engaged. Or they may be playing, maybe numbers have dropped here and there as well overall. And we talked about engagement. That's at the core of the business model. And if people are not engaging or re-engaging, Houston, we have a problem, right?
I can't believe it, and I can't believe Destiny 2's only been out for like 1 year. It feels like it's been out longer.
Well, because it's a continuation of the original Destiny. Essentially, it's not even a follow-up or a sequel. It's more a continuation. You're playing Destiny, rebooted Destiny 2. That's what it is, right? Remember, the often quoted on this program, many other programs, concept original Destiny program, I would call it, not as a software, but as in the whole aspect, I've been quoted as $500 million. That's $500 million on a single IP. That has to have included Destiny 2. And if they're not getting their money's worth now with that huge investment, they probably made that $500 million already. But the thing is, like, should investors keep investing, and can we justify making an equal or greater expenditures in the future? And that's the key. So yeah, you have to be able to read between the lines here. And the fact that Bungie's saying, we're happy with it. How can I put this? It doesn't fucking matter. What do you think?
So this almost seems like sort of like the disconnect between the developer and the publisher, and it really does make you wonder how much control Bungie does have over Destiny. Because sometimes I hear like, oh, they have a lot of creative control and how these monetizations go down, and then sometimes I hear the opposite that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, where is the line between what they control and what they don't control?
My take on it is that the person who writes the checks has control.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. And they exert as little or as much control as they think they can get away with or they want to. Because at the end of the day, those have if Bungie, when they came out of their working relationship with Microsoft, in which they lost the one and only IP they had, which was Halo. In other words, Bungie was a company existed before Microsoft Games, but then when they got in bed with Microsoft Games, Halo belonged to Microsoft and not to Bungie. They went to Destiny with now under Activision Blizzard, which probably means that Destiny doesn't belong to Bungie. There are people who work on it, but they don't own it. Tomorrow, Destiny, Activision can say, okay, we're gonna do this Destiny 3 with another studio. Oops.
Yep.
Yeah, the rule. I think it's not about lines. It's about the rule. Whoever writes the checks makes the rules. Talking about writing checks, two pieces of news were part of the same thing. Square Enix canceled Final Fantasy 15 episodes as director quits company.
Yeah.
What happened here, of course, was that Final Fantasy 15 was designed to be this kind of not quite game as service, but close enough, in that they would have a bunch of DLC package. Every major character in the boy band centric storyline of Final Fantasy 15 would have their own DLC. Well, it turns out that the person that was running that separate studio, essentially, the 4 DLC episodes centered on the characters Arden, Arania, Lunafreya, and Noctis. Noctis being the main character of the game, by the way, and they hold it to last because they wanted to people keep playing. Will be cancelled. Instead, only Arden episode will be released. The other 3 have been abandoned. There'll be collaboration with the Final Fantasy 14 next month. Collaboration, there'll be crossover with Final Fantasy 14. The director of that studio, Tabata, Debacho particularly provided because he recently set up and took control of a new studio within Square Enix, Luminous Productions. Final Fantasy 15 went through a famously troubled and protracted development. Tabata is likely credited with turning the project around and taking over the directional role from Tetsuya Nomura in 2014. The game was critical in commercial success and continued to be updated with new features and content and versions. But here's the kicker. Square Enix posts a $33 million loss and cancels the Final 15 content amid Tabata designation. So not just a matter of, we just canceled the game.
Yep.
Here's $33 million that went down the drain.
And I would assume this is all like, unfinished assets and stuff, like storylines, just the investment that Square Enix had to make to pay people to write, start animating, maybe do concept art. That's never going to come to full fruition, so therefore it's never going to be packaged to a final product, sold, and made a turn around and make its budget back and then a profit.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting transition because it shows that we're not simply talking about one company. It's very easy to look at, say, Activision's like Activision's in trouble. Oh, well, because they're Activision, right? Or Bethesda is in trouble because of Bethesda. Or Electronic Arts is in trouble because of Electronic Arts, right? We're seeing a pattern here of actual losses, or at least not as much making much money as possible. Which brings us to our old subject about the business model and the state of the industry. Now, I want to make a big caveat here. I think we're going to dip into the deep, troubling waters of predictions, whether we want to or not. And as predictions goes, and those are difficult to make. For example, I was one of those who joined the bandwagon that predicted that this generation of consoles were going to be a complete total failure. Oh boy, was I wrong. Was I ever wrong? And even people, I've talked about, the video game crash in 1983 and all of that. And I apologize if you hear some noise in the background. They're cleaning up, in this apartment building. So, they're cutting the grass and all of that. So I apologize for that. but I think we have to talk about it because these individually these could be just blips on the proverbial financial radar, but we're seeing more of these news across the board. More companies taking hits like this. So first and foremost, I'm going to pose a question: are we actually getting to the point where the consumer base, let's not call them gamers, let's not call players, consumer base is just exhausted with microtransactions and the overall business model? Are we start seeing the not simply angry or upset or snarky or sarcastic, but actually voting with their wallets and saying, you know what, we don't need this, we don't want it, we don't need this?
I think it's not so much exhaustion over the microtransaction system. I think what we're seeing is an oversaturation of games with these microtransactions. And as we've mentioned before, when it comes to live services, is that you do have to keep your players engaged, but it comes to a point where like all these, how many games as services can you have out there in the market? Because you have to have people invest not just their money, but their time into these games. And there's only so many hours in the day. Mm-hmm. People need to eat, people need to sleep, people need to work so they can make that money that they can turn around and spend on the video game.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've always, and on a lot of these games as service are slowly starting to seem like it's almost like a second job. You come home and then you start doing the thing. You log in to take get your daily for logging in and participating in some small event. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the market is probably going to almost kind of crash, in the sense that there's way too many of these games that need so much of time investment that people are just going to become disengaged and maybe just not even participate at all.
Yeah, and we've seen slowdowns and crashes of particular sectors of the video game economy before. We're not talking about 1983 all over again, and even 1983 was a North American concept and in consoles primarily, not across the board on computers, PC gaming, Japan, Europe, other places, and the video game industry, even in the United States, jumped back pretty quickly. A lot of old faces were gone, but new people came in, especially Japanese companies like Sega and Nintendo came back in between 1984 and 1986. So it wasn't permanent. But I think, again, it reminds me a lot of 2007, 2008, with all the companies, and this is sort of the chasing of the white whale, as I call it. Everybody wanted to do an MMO. And this is basically MMO Rush 2.0, because in many ways, that's what live services are about. It's a rebranding of the MMO business model. And even the experience to a degree, because that's what it was, the MMO. You got into World of Warcraft, right? You played for hours, and you had microtransactions and gold sellers and stuff like that. You did your dailies. You did, you got on with your friends. You went and did the raid here and a new area, and you level your character, and so on and so forth. And eventually what happened is a couple of things, but people just got tired of it. It's like, there was only so many things you could do, right? And so many raids. And even today, World of Warcraft is still one of the best sellers. It usually, what happens is when they release a new expansion, people go up, oh, this is a new expansion. A couple of weeks, a month or two later, it's like, okay, we've seen everything we have to have offer, and out we go, right? It's not even a filler game for a lot of people. Like I got back into World of Warcraft when I was streaming, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of boring. I don't want to do this for a very long time. Even when it's free to play, it's like, I don't think you can do that. There's also a matter, like we're talking about Bethesda, is time and time again, and this is sort of one of the other weaknesses of, there are many of them, but one of the weaknesses is the idea of that, release now, patch later. Mm-hmm. And with the live service, because again, it has this sort of mentality of the MMO is, oh, well, it's an online service. We have to maintain the service, which means hot fixes and patches and putting more content. So eventually we're going to give you what you want. I think this is where I think exhaustion is hitting. It's like, yeah, but I already own games that work fairly well from the get-go, and you're demanding all this time and money from me, right? To quote, they talk about it, on the Tumblr blog. It's like, yeah, oh, well, if I can sell microtransactions to people, they'll buy it because it's a value proposition. I think recently people are going like, yeah, buying a broken game that literally doesn't either erases my entire drive or where this it is. We talked about that last week. Not my entire drive, but folder and they're in, and that was an indie game, but it happened. Or a game that literally I can't play. Even though I have the beta available until I buy it, but it's in beta format. I mean, and many other bugs. It's just it. It's very hard to make a good second impression. If it's hard to make a good first impression, it's even harder to make a second impression. And yes, we have a lot of some stories about people coming back to games, Diablo 3 and stuff like that, but they have required massive changes in order for people to come back to them, and to take key elements. And one of the things with microtransactions is that you are increasingly making games deliberately grindy so that people will buy the microtransactions. When we talk about re-engagement, one of the other piece of news that we didn't talk about Destiny was that in that call was that by talking about re-engagement, saying we're going to double down. Another way to interpret that quote is we're going to double down on the people that are already engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to ask for more money, have more microtransactions, make the game even more fragmented in what we offer in order to extract that much more dollar proposition. If people are not joining games in a timely fashion, right? Like I said, that they wait until the game gets good because it's broken in release. That affects the game. And if people leave because there's this other new game or they just get tired of the game, these games don't have anything. They don't have any. There's no other options. Right? There's no other game to substitute this game for the people who are making it. Right? If you spend $100 million, $250, $300, $500 million, you can maybe do that one game. But can you do that for every single game, and then turn around and complain that games are too expensive? Right? You set yourself up in this business model. You want this business model, which means you're going to have to spend more and more money to make the newer, bigger game that much more bigger and attractive. But at the same time, the model is based on people playing the same game over and over. So, if you actually have to make the Destiny 2 out of the original Destiny, that in a way is an acceptance of failure, right? Because there's a difference between updating the graphics in World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is still World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Destiny 2 is supposed to be a different game from the original Destiny, enough to warrant the 2 in it. It really isn't, but there you go. And in fact, I have it on my computer. They made it for free, right? They essentially made it a small window, making it a free-to-play game to attract people. You can play the base content, but if you want all the extra options, you have to pay. And I think the pricing, and this is something that happened all the way back to the original Destiny, that the pricing of some of the stuff that was given, especially in the expansions, was as expensive or more expensive than the base game. So, and another aspect of this is that we've seen this many times before. The tendency of the companies is when they get into trouble, again, that line, we have to re-engage, find ways to re-engage the players, is to double and triple down on this. It isn't like, oh, what do we have as alternatives? I think Ubisoft is playing it smart because they're re-releasing other games. Like they released the Spyro game, the things like, oh yeah, we have these very grindy, very big games like Assassin's Creed, but we also have this back catalog of games that maybe they're not going to sell, 25 million copies, but they can easily make, profits at 1 million copies or 2 million or 500,000 copies, right? So the question is this the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end? That's the big question is looming, and which I think it's very problematic even asking the question, but I think considering the news that we're seeing, I think it's worth asking.
It makes me wonder if making video games through, I guess, these traditional means of funding in terms of like stock market and having investors and stockholders, maybe it's not such a good idea. It's because the way I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, what does it take to make a video game and, get all that funding and to just be able to put it out there, and let alone actually make your money back and stuff. So as of now, the way I see it, it's like you have to pay people for years to make one product and hope that that product sells so that you can cover your expenses that for however long it took you to make, and then hopefully have some money left over for profit, and maybe even have some money left over to start up making a second product and keep your company alive.
Yeah, but that's how all products are out there, right? If I make a car and that car sells, then I use the sales of that one line of cars to design and build the next line of cars and the next one and the next one, and I diversify my. But one of the things is, for example, in many industries, and this is one of the problems of the sort of like service thing, is that successful companies have a variety of products available, right? So like, for example, you buy a car, there's one Ford will make, the big trucks and the SUVs and the 4-door sedan and the 2-door car. They'll have a range of products. Here, we used to have a range of products, but as you go more and more into the games as service, the big game, the white whale, and you spend more money into that, that means that there are less products out there to diversify. Like, that's why I'm talking about Ubisoft, right? It's like Ubisoft is still keeping these smaller products around because they want to have a wider stable, right? They know that, if Assassin's Creed doesn't make bank, I still can, recoup some losses, right? And I think also it's and when we talk about investors, we talk about investors, this, investors, that, but investors feed off of the expectations set by the companies to begin with, right? We have a sort of bit, because of microtransaction, primarily explosive growth of companies in the video game market, and they went from double digits to triple digits in billions, right, earnings a year, or overall industry. There's a sort of gold rush mentality, and it's all that sort of, we need to find the next vein of gold, right? We need to find the next. We have to keep this going, right?
And that's sort of where I was kind of taking my thought. It's like, is there a point where we're sort of, I guess, companies are getting too much money to invest? It's like, oh, let's, we got all of this pile of money, we made a game, let's put more money into this game and make it better and stuff. But at some point, you're not going to get like your return back, and you're going to end up losing because you're pumping too much money. Like, you're making games, I don't know, way too, I hate the term, cinematic or realistic or whatever you want to say. Like, you're spending too much money on, animating Lara Croft's hair and putting testicle physics in the game to mimic real life, that you're not going to see a return on that investment, because I don't know, like, it's either it's superfluous, sure, it's immersive, but maybe it's not worth putting in the money.
And also, I think
because it doesn't make the game fun and it won't sell.
Yeah, it's management expectations of the audience, management expectations of the the investors. If your game was such a terrific success last time around at, say, $100 million, then the expectation is that your next game is gonna make X amount more, and you have to guarantee that. And the way to guarantee it is by hype, by getting a lot of pre-orders, by putting microtransactions, right? It becomes a self-serving phenomenon, right? It's like, which I think blinds the industry to other possibilities, right? Instead of diversifying their product line, everybody seems to be jumping on games and services, except maybe for Nintendo. Everybody's doing microtransactions. We're going to do microtransactions. Look at what happened with mobile games. A lot of companies, we're going to do mobile games because mobile games are making a lot of money. Well, they hasn't gone as well as expected. I mean, they're having complete losses, but it wasn't this forever, train of growth that people have seen it, at least for the AAA companies, especially American AAA companies, because of attitudes. We'll talk about Diablo Immortal. Well, it's going to sell, but they already sort of stepped on it, and they went on the back foot and stuff like that. I think it's. I don't see a problem necessarily on the basic of make a product, take those profits, invest it. That's basic capitalism. It it works. It's risky, but it works. There's no guarantee the next one's gonna be as successful as the last one, right? But we're seeing a combination of marrying to a very specific business model because that's the only thing we can see, right? It has to work because it's worked so before. And no one is reevaluating what it really takes. You mentioned earlier the divide between publishers and developers, right? What does it really take to make a video game? Nobody has had a sort of, at least in public anyway, I'm sure in private a lot of people are talking about this, hopefully. But we, outside of some talks here and there, some TED Talks and whatnot, bits and pieces, again, because one of the other problems is the video game industry is very secretive and in a very weird way, a very patchy way, right? And consistently so. They can talk about certain things extensively, and other talks are like, oh, we don't know we can talk about that. It's weird. So we don't have a lot of the information that we should have available to us. So discussing these things becomes problematic. And making predictions on this becomes even more problematic on top of just being predictions. But I think nobody's reevaluating how to make games across the industry so that you first and foremost get working products out into the public without destroying the very people that are making the games and without adding stuff like making everything following the business model as is right now, having that microtransactions, having to have always online. Because I think the problem is that many of these things individually can work on free-to-play games for microtransactions, always online for MMOs and similar games, multiplayer games. But the attitude is that all these things work here. We're going to take all these things. We're just going to smoosh them together. If it makes money here, it's going to put it. I'm going to, it's like making a movie by committee. Oh, we need a sexy young, leading star, male or female. We need a chase sequence. We need a fight sequence. We need a love sequence. We need these things. So we're going to make it by formula, by route, and ta-da, we have a movie. And yeah, it's a movie, but it can be a big steaming pile of crap because it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, it's what happened to Telltale. They kept doing the same thing over and over and over again and doubling, tripling, quadrupling now. And depending not on sales, because as popular as some other products was, I think the type of game, and me, I always put that into,
when talking about them, yes.
Yeah. It was always fringe, right? Adventure games, I think the height of adventure games was the 1990s. And I think more people remember them fondly for the sort of cultural impact they had within gaming rather than how people actually played them, as many as they do. They were successful for what they were, LucasArts and stuff like that. The Manic Mansions, Day of the Tentacle, Sam and Max. But and that's another industry that also got saturated as well in 1990. People don't remember there were just tons. Even today, there's tons of these games. There's always been on the fringe. And there's always a risk you can do that whatever is hot today is necessarily as hot tomorrow. There's no guarantee of that. Look, we're talking about survival games. About they always do your jumping on survival games at a time where survival games, 2 or 3 years ago, wow, they were the thing. Like everybody, you could roll one survival game after another, after another, after another on early access, make millions of dollars, and then not even finish the game, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like how what we've seen this year is the Me Too of it is is Battle Royale.
Mm-hmm.
Like Battle Royale, everyone's trying to capitalize on the Battle Royale. Oh yeah, I can make one too. Come play my Battle Royale. We saw that with Boss Key Productions, who their last Gas of Life was trying to capitalize on that because their first game was trying to capitalize on the trend that kind of came and went, which was the hero shooter,
mm-hmm.
which was set by Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think back. I'm thinking about it now. It's sort of like you got Call of Duty, who right now has like their their take of battle royale,
Mm-hmm.
when at one point they were kind of setting that, like they had the Nazi zombies thing, which
Mm-hmm.
was everyone started kind of capitalizing on that, and that was even kind of before the zombie peak of gaming and the trend.
Yeah, and that's another aspect of this. Going back to how you make games, is that if you expect bigger and bigger games, more complex, with more detail, with more things, it also takes not only more money, it also takes more time.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that by the time that game releases, like, oh, today, somebody in the office of EA say, oh, Battle Royale, that's a thing. Let's make a Battle Royale game. Oh, it takes about 3 to 4 or 5 years for that one game, say BioWare or whatever, Treyarch or whatever they have. It's like, hey, yeah, you make us whoever makes the checks, writes the checks, makes the rules. I want a battle royale game. Okay, we're gonna make a battle royale game. If you're making in the indie space, you can sort of cut corners and make a very simple game and make a parody or something, put out a game in 6 months, maybe a year. But if you have a big studio, you're like, yeah, that's gonna take us like 5 years to make. By the time it comes out, it's like, battle what? No, we're doing, space exploration now. We're doing this other thing, right? Nobody's really doing. And how much money do you spend on this to bring it to market? Yeah. Well, that wave just crashed. I mean, people are still playing Battle Royale. They're playing the 1 or 2 games that are dominant in that arena, 3 at most. But
It sort of makes me, I something that just kind of came to thought too is if do you think Kickstarter games or games that get their funding from Kickstarter, do you think they suffer from crunch or the crunch mentality?
not so much. I think they suffer from almost the opposite, in the sense they suffer from bloat.
Well, yeah, usually if they get way more money than
Yeah,
their
either if
budget.
they don't get enough money, they just collapse on their own way. It's like, well, we can't really pay the wages of the people that we have them. So at best, we're just going to throw something out there. Kickstarter is a little bit different. It was supposed to be an alternative to the big budgets, but I think mostly they suffer from bloat. It's like, oh yeah, well, everybody wants to play this game, right? You expected a million, you get 10 million or 20 million, 30 million. And also with Kickstarter, now we know that it's not purely Kickstarter. Kickstarter for at least AA games. Maybe indie games can be, financed still with Kickstarter if you're using 8-bit and 16-bit graphics and some other things, vector graphics, but not at least AA games, or even certainly AAA games quality. At least an indie game with a AAA quote unquote polish, which is anything but these days, you can't. So what they do is that the people who are making the game go, hey, we already have this seed money. They go to investors and say, would you fill in the rest? So it's more a hybrid thing, right? So that might be a problem. It's Kickstarter. One, you can have bloat where you have some people throwing a lot of money, and so they keep promising more and more features, and so they basically burn through their budget. And the other part of it is that in many ways Kickstarter literally kickstarts a project, but it's not enough to finish it.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two main problems with Kickstarter, or crowdsourcing funding, is that it can be too much or not enough, but it varies wildly, right?
Yeah, and I believe we saw something similar, that issue about too much bloat with what was it, the System Shock remake.
Yeah.
That they ended up getting too much money and they actually kind of lost sight of what they were supposed to be doing, and it was an entire mess. I think they pretty much had to scrap everything and start over.
Mighty Number 9.
Yeah.
Which it was a bloat of promises rather than features, right? They kept promising more and more, and eventually they couldn't deliver on it. So I think crunch is also a problem throughout the video game industry, but that's more of a time management and leadership problem. And we talked about that. Attitudes of before. It's like, oh no, this is the way we've done before, so we're gonna do it again because by God, it worked yesterday.
Yeah, it has to work today.
Yeah. So I think. Okay, prediction time. and I'm going to reiterate something, and I can argue that many of my predictions already come true because I made predictions in the past. We talked about this. You were the one who posed the question. It was like, if there's not going to be a complete collapse, what's going to happen? And I think what I predicted is that some companies were going to take some significant hits. I even predicted that Activision Blizzard might split, right? We're seeing the opposite right now. But if
they might double down.
Yeah, unless they rebound or unless Activision is the actual running company and Blizzard is just an attachment to them. If Activision keeps taking these hits, and they're significant hits in the millions and billions of dollars, at some point they're going to go to the Blizzard side and go, hey, we need cash. And depending on how much control Blizzard has over their own assets, that's going to be, if they don't have enough control, what's going to happen is Activision is going to hollow them out. And then we end up with a situation, well, Activision is still alive and well, but Blizzard is a thing of the past. It's a name brand with some games here and there, but they've been hollowed out. Or we might see a split. That's a possibility. That's like all predictions. We talk about the plausible and possible, not the real until it actually happens in whatever form. If it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. Hedging my bets there. I did predict that Activision could take some hits. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to see one or two major companies, if not completely disappeared, really be diminished. I think that's going forward. That what you're going to have is these games, we're going to reach a peak, and I think we're reaching the peak now, and they're going to start imploding, right? They're going to sort of collapse onto themselves. And when that happens, you're going to have casualties. But mostly on the developer side, of course, because they're always the ones to take the first hits.
Yeah, because I believe like a couple of years ago, people were just talking about how, oh no, like Capcom might go out of business because they were in financial trouble or they had like very low money in their bank account, essentially. And they're still around. But even then, I think like there was like a story, I think we might have reported it on it, that like Monster Hunter did great. Monster Hunter World did like gangbusters, but even then it wasn't like all that much to really write home about in terms of how much they spent and everything. So I think we're going to start running into that issues. And what was it? Wasn't it earlier this year that Ubisoft managed to kind of fight off getting bought out?
Yeah,
it was getting who was trying to buy them out? Like
Vivendi Media wanted to do a hostile takeover, but they fell under French law. It's a French company, and I don't know if Ubisoft is actually private. Well, no, they're not privately owned. Just that the brothers that manage it are sort of have a strong interest in the company, but it's public. I
wonder if we're gonna see more of that, but not so much as a one giant hostile takeover, but bit by bit, especially by Chinese investors.
Yeah, again, because they're the ones who have the money.
Yeah, right? And of course we've also reported on how was it Epic and what's that other company? Now I'm spacing out on them that own
PUBG. Yeah.
PUBG
are owned by Tencent.
Yeah, or at least they have some stake in both companies, and they might have been the reason why that lawsuit between them kind of just quietly fizzled out.
Yeah.
So I kind of predict that we'll probably see more of that.
More mergers, more things. Yeah, that's also a possibility. I think that's another thing with the again, management expectations and wanting to have more money always, right? This sort of unsustainable growth rate. We talk about Monster Hunter, when you have successful games, and yet they're not enough, right? That's not healthy, right? And that's why we're having these losses, because it's not that Call of Duty is not selling, it's that it's not selling enough, even if it's selling millions of copies and making hundreds of millions, not billions of dollars, right? It just becomes a ridiculous and unsustainable situation, right? And I think the companies that are probably going to survive, people are companies going to either they're not going to jump on that bandwagon, or other ones are going to go yeah, maybe we should sort of slow down and look at our alternatives and make sure that we don't put all eggs into one boiling basket, and hopefully that's going to end. And The problem is I don't see EA doing that. They're going full broke on, on on that. But they have their sports games, so that's always a saving for them. Ubisoft is hedging its bets, so I think they're playing safe, a little bit safe. Their games are pretty massive, but they really haven't embraced it completely, at least not in the current games, but they're close. Activision Blizzard, both of them, as a hybrid, they're gone full hog on it, and they're taking the hits for it. And some other companies, right? It's the more companies do this, the riskier it becomes, the more crowded the market becomes, the more fatigue sets in, etc. And you start seeing the cracks widening and opening. Bethesda's gone into it as well. Then they're taking hits. Again, like any prediction, it might just be that this is just a growing spurt, right? This is just the thing, because this could be the opposite. It's like, oh no, this is really the way for the future, and people are really getting into, games of service, and that's going to be great. And what happens is that these are the growing pains of that. But we're, I think, on a increasingly critical moment. That I think is for sure, and we'll see what happens I think by 2020, in a year or so, 2021, the next couple of years are the ones we have to really watch. I expect more. At least I think we're gonna see more of these news come next November. We'll see if any of things is real. Yeah.
I also want I almost want to say, like, predict hearing more stories of, like, EA closes down, small studio thing that was once famous, and now it's shut down. It's just a foot page now,
which is a way of controlling costs instead of an accounting trick. Which, if it happens once or twice, it's horrible for the people who get fired, of course, but the company survives. But if it becomes their primary survival strategy, then they're on that. They're really gonna be out, because eventually you run out of people that are gonna work for you, right?
Well, yeah, actually, Capcom just did that a couple, like, last month.
Yeah. So we'll see. Well, those are our very dire predictions for the future. Hopefully next week we have happier news and a different take on this. I think next week is gonna be Thanksgiving. So hopefully we're going to have an earlier program, maybe. We'll talk about that during the week. If you want to know more about the program, of course, you can follow us on Discord and on this channel. And Chapelmon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
So I'm Chapelmon pretty much everywhere. I am Chapelmon_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter. And I primarily hang out on YouTube as just Chapelmon.
And, of course, you can find me here as Lessons Learned 1 and Lessons Learned on YouTube. We're going to probably just put this on the vault over there. The Discord is available. You can click down below, and we're continuing to, and hopefully finishing sometime this month, Pathfinder Kingmaker. I apologize for not being able to stream 2 mornings in a row. Real life gets in the way, I suppose. So there we have it. But thank you all, everybody, for coming, and as always, we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.